Okay, now we are finally live, and I'm very, very happy to welcome you to today's ID Talk. The ID Talks this autumn are focusing on anti-racism under the motto, let's talk about anti-racism. And today we have a very special edition because we are going to talk about intersectionality and racism. Just to remind our first-time followers, ID Talks is a series of independent events that are organized every second Wednesday, 1 p.m. Central European Time by SALTO Inclusion and Diversity Resource Center. And every time we are bringing interesting experts, speakers from the field to talk about topics of common interest, to talk about topics that are close to our heart in the frame of the general topic of anti-racism. And today, we are going to talk about intersectionality and racism. What if you don't only have a minority ethnicity, but also a disability, a different religion, sexual orientation, or maybe multiple other factors that make discrimination even more challenging for you and making your struggle to defend your rights even more challenging. Today, we are going to zoom into the intersectionality between disability and race, and I feel extremely privileged to introduce you our speaker, Lydia Gratis from Ireland. She is from South Africa, Malawi, and from Ireland, educator, activist, and social media creative, a writer and social media and communications officer, one of the co-founders of Saved by the Sign Association, as well as serving on the board of EU Youth Deaf Association. I'm very much privileged and extremely happy to pass you the floor now, Lydia, and maybe to present yourself even further, because the list of the things that you are doing, the list of the things that you're advocating is so long, it's impossible to consolidate it in one short introduction. You now have the floor, and for our audience, following Lydia's presentation, we will also have a chance to exchange and to bring in more ideas, questions to the speaker. Please, you now have the floor.
Thank you very much for the introduction and welcoming me to this platform. I'm very excited to make this presentation today to speak about my work and everything that I've done with Saved by the Sign. I will explain my work as well as my personal life. I'll give you my life story as well. Both of these platforms are interconnected. You know, it can't be separated. So I will explain as to who I am and how I've been involved in this work that I'm doing. So to start with, I was born in South Africa, and then I moved to Ireland at the age of 7. That was a big cultural shock because South Africa is different. We have a strong Black community there, and it's really a very different setup. So moving along with that identity and identifying as a Black person, arriving in Ireland had a big cultural shock for me. It was a big impact on my life. I was involved in the deaf school and the deaf community. You know, my whole life turned around because I was involved in many other activities that I haven't identified with at that point in time. So it was a bit of a shocker for me. So when I entered the deaf school, my culture, my identity was kind of suppressed because I had to fit in. So for the first 15 years of my life, I really tried to fit in with the system, with all these white people. And then when I went to the school, everyone was hearing as well. I was the only deaf person. So interpreter's mistake. So the deaf community is white, right? They were all white, and all the Black community was hearing. So this means that I was a bit taken aback as an individual because I tried to fit in with both these communities to really try to understand myself for the first time, you know, to have applicable resources, to learn to sign as well. So that was a big struggle for me. And then when the age of 15, I was the only Black, I felt like I was the only Black person in this whole wide world. I really believed that I was the only Black person in this whole wide world. And the first time I met another Black deaf person was when I went to Sweden. And that's my business partner right now. We saw we have not seen each other for 15 years prior to our meeting. So that really was, you know, the experience of many deaf people right now. Many deaf people have the same, Black deaf people have the same experience in Europe, because we don't have access to their language, to a lot of resources, to their culture, to better understand themselves. And this is why they have this implicit understanding. So this means that we lag behind. There's this lagging behind. Deaf children really doesn't know what to do. You know, they want to understand themselves better. They want to have a grip on their self-identity and who they are, where they fit in, what they can and cannot do. And there's no adequate resource or information for them to get along. So Lydia will now start speaking and the interpreter will start signing. Lydia?
Oftentimes this means that deaf people, Black deaf people specifically, don't have access to information in their first language. They don't have access to resources in their first language. So if you would take, for instance, deaf children who are Muslim, they go to the mosque and oftentimes they don't know the du'as that are being said. They don't know what is happening, what is being, why they have to do the things that they have to do. And they grow up in this world of not understanding themselves. The same for Black deaf youth, Asian deaf youth in Europe, because the deaf community here is predominantly white, meaning a lot of conversations are considered taboo or considered unnecessary until later in life when they have the words to express what their experiences are. I'm going to share a PPT now to kind of dive deeper into the work that we do at Saved by the Sign, the work that I do as the president of AUDY, but also the impact that has had on the community so far. I can't see the interpreter. Perfect. So I'm just trying to pin the interpreter. Sorry. So we started Saved by the Sign in February this year as a social media platform and consultation company to basically advocate for the social inclusion of Black deaf youth here in Europe. And the reason we started that was because Mama and I, both having grown up in Europe, him being from Haiti and moving to Sweden at the age of 13 with no access to language, no understanding of his community, his culture, or being deaf in general. And me having grown up in South Africa, being thrown into a community whereby I felt like I needed to fit in with the Black community who were all hearing. I needed to hide my deafness as to not receive sympathy or be undermined in spaces. I made my mom send me to speech therapy 3 times a week just so I could speak and not sound deaf. Trauma response. In the deaf community, I tried to fit in as much as I could, straightening my hair, trying to adjust my appearance to be as close to Eurocentric standards of beauty as possible. But you can't hide your skin color, you can't change your skin color. All that effort was just inducing more trauma in me. And I find this with my work and my research to be the case for many youth of color in Europe. Because if they do have, it's either they are the only one in their country, the only Black person, or the only Asian person in the deaf community in that country, like myself, up until 2006, or it appears that they have a big Black deaf community, a big Asian deaf community, but they don't interact with each other, they don't spend time with each other because they try to fit in the deaf community and not be seen as the others. Our workshops are usually a safe space, usually sometimes the first time that youth are able to sit together and be like, this is what I experienced, but I don't know what autism is, I don't know what racism is, I don't know what sexism is, and I knew these experiences were problematic, but I didn't know how to articulate them, and I didn't know that I wasn't the only one experiencing them, and that my feelings are valid. So, as I said before, not only do we do this work with Save by the Sign, we also do the work with EUDY, the European Union for Deaf Youth, which is a non-profit organization that works with the European Parliament, Council of Europe, Youth Department, and so on, to provide resources and education to deaf youth all over Europe. For the last 35 years, many youth of color in Europe who are deaf have never wanted to interact or integrate with EUDY because they've never seen themselves represented in that space. They often feel as though because the people within the organization do not represent them, the space is not for them. So that is 35 years of an all-white board and all-white staff up until 2020. 2020, the year George Floyd died, EUDY reached out to myself, Amal, and a third person, Samia, from the UK. All three are Black, all three are deaf. Samia being a Black deaf woman who's also a Muslim. We came onto this platform and we spoke about our experiences with racism within the deaf community in Europe, unpacking trauma, unpacking the work that we do with our youth and so on. And this created a domino effect whereby after the panel discussion, I reached out to EUDY asking if we could set up a focus group for deaf youth of color in Europe, and they immediately were on board. They supported the idea. They gave us the platform to do this. After a year, we set up a team of all 5 people, myself, Ramal, Belcher, Nadeem Islam, Katya Pahud, and Amrit Nangla. All 5 of us went on to set up a study session. And at the study session, this is the first time youth of color in Europe had a space and a platform to come together for the first time in their entire life, from the age of 18 to 35. It was a life-changing week. And from that week to now, some of the people that participated in that study session are now on the staff of EUDY, are now on the board of EUDY, are now in the focus groups, are leaders at our children's camps, and I'm now the president of EUDY, which is a huge honor. We're seeing more diversity within the organization, which means more space to discuss experiences that differ from each other, which also means we strengthen the deaf community. We provide a space for resources and tools to be translated into international sign language for everybody to be able to articulate their experiences, but also be able to find educational spaces, resources, and people to network with to elevate themselves and empower themselves, which I think is a huge, it's something that's very much needed, especially within Europe. We know America and other continents have a Black deaf community already, have role models and spaces, which is not something that people have here in Europe. Mel and I are also on the board of the National Association of the Deaf in our countries, him on the Swedish board, me on the Irish board, which predominantly works with the whole deaf community, not just youth. We co-founded UEDY, the focus group of EUDY, and I'm also on the All Ireland Women's Forum, a national women's forum in Ireland consisting of 28 women all over Ireland who have come together and are discussing peace building, education, bringing more women into politics, and creating a yearly report for the government to enhance women's participation in all change-making spaces. The reason we set up and created Save by the
I am struggling to see the interpreter at the moment.
The reason why we then went on from UEDY to Saved by the Sign is because we wanted to have a space where we could talk about discussions, we could talk about topics in the broader deaf community, not just in Europe. Meaning now we had access to mentors and leaders all over the world who are Black and deaf too. Which was sparked by a conversation we had where we realized that we'd never met somebody over 50 in the deaf community in Europe who was Black, and we thought we could look up to and were inspired by, or was leading a social movement to ensure that the next generation had a safe space to cultivate anything that they were passionate about. Starting Saved by the Sign means we had access to mentors in the States, such as Lindsay Dunn, who is a lecturer at Gallaudet University, the only deaf university in the world. He is leading the Black Deaf Studies department, which has been a huge shift for us, being able to understand experiences from somebody who himself grew up and was born in South Africa, moved to America, witnessed the civil rights movement and witnessed apartheid growing up. Something we don't often have the deaf perspective on, but now can share. A lot of people get confused about the difference between EUDY, the European Union of Deaf Youth, and UEDY, Ubuntu European Deaf Youth. EUDY is the umbrella organization that advocates for deaf youth all over Europe, and UEDY is the focus group. So the work that we do often means that we're in spaces where if we're in the deaf community and we're talking about autism and advocating for the access of deaf people, Black deaf people often have a opposing opinion and opposing experience, whereby we enter spaces and we enter rooms and the first thing people see is our skin color or our appearance, which is the common factor for many deaf youth of color. And this means that in white spaces, we're seen as intimidating, we are treated not so nicely. But as soon as we express our disability or our deafness, we're no longer a threat. Doors are opening for us, opportunities are coming our way, because we're no longer seen as intimidating, as we're often seen as less than. The conversation around this often means that advocating for access for deaf youth doesn't look the same for everybody. How we enter spaces as deaf people doesn't look the same for everybody. How we're received in spaces as deaf people, how we're given access doesn't look the same for everybody. So we try to spotlight as many elderly deaf role models who are doing impactful work, whether that's within administrative work in the government, educational work in different departments, and show deaf youth that they have access and they have the ability to do that too, despite the limitations placed on them by society. The world often has conversations on social media, through the news, and many different aspects of communication, which is never translated into sign language, whether it's the sign language of the country or international sign language, meaning that we're also last to get information, we're also behind in understanding situations, and this impacts the progression of the community, this impacts who is put into change-making spaces, decision-making spaces, and who has the power to ensure that everybody is progressing in their respective fields. Having these conversations informally through a podcast means that a lot of people are able to actually reach out and want to share their thoughts and opinions, ask questions in a safe space, and understand that there is no stupid question, there is no wrong question, we're all growing together. This also means that we do workshops within deaf youth associations, particularly to white deaf organizations, interpreting organizations, youth organizations, national associations, deaf companies on diversity, inclusion, and equity, giving them space to ask questions that often would be seen as offensive or maybe wrong, but the uncomfortable conversations mean that everybody is growing together. It means that perspectives have been shifted. It means that the information that the world already knows is actually been given to the deaf community, and we're able to have those conversations on a wider platform. Deaf people are often not provided with interpreting, and this is often given as budgeting reasons, as not being a priority. But in the fight for social justice, when we're not given space to participate, we're being left behind. And that means perspectives that could potentially change situations are being ignored. That means deaf children, particularly, grow up not understanding society, not understanding themselves, not understanding their culture. And this brings a lot of trauma, a lot of anger. And usually it's trauma based on autism. Trauma based on autism because it comes firsthand from family, whereby there may be 5, 6 children in a family, and one being deaf and is sent to boarding school, is sent away. And they grow up with this understanding of, my parents could have learned sign language. Why did they move to Europe and focus on my other siblings? And we have to bring that perspective of migrant parents that move to another country are often left with the responsibility to not just care for their children, but provide for their families back home, provide for themselves, take care of themselves, work more than one job. There's so much on their plate that sign language is usually the last thing that they think of. It's never intentional, it's never malicious, but it's a common thread and a common experience with not just deaf youth, but all migrant youth, who often complain of not being able to speak their language. It's universal spoken languages. They don't know their native tongue, but they can understand. They have receptive bilingualism. They can understand their mother tongue, but they cannot speak it, which is the case for me. Being from South Africa and Malawi, I can understand Chichewa, I can understand Xhosa, but I don't speak it. Without the perspective of why our parents did this, or why the education system made us speak rather than sign, not understanding the why means that a lot of resentment and trauma and pain and mental health problems are not tackled. The deaf community all over the world looks very different. It's very diverse, it's very cultured. There's so many common threads that tie it to when we're talking about the Black deaf community. There's so many mannerisms and threads that tie it to hearing communities in each country, similarities and things that we do that are so connected, but because of the fact that in communities of color, disability and deafness are seen as inferior, something that needs to be fixed, something that needs to be healed, those conversations are not being had. And so we thought, how do we bring these conversations to the hearing community, and how do we show them what we can do and what we do and who is out there, deaf lawyers, deaf doctors, deaf dentists, deaf mentors, deaf artists, deaf creators, everybody doing what they're doing. How do we bring them to the hearing world and the hearing space and have these conversations where people are not intimidated and shift the narrative in order to accelerate the progression of the global deaf community? This often means that we need to talk about being a minority within a minority and what that looks like, what that feels like, minority stress in particular. Black people going into white spaces often feel as though they are not accepted. They often feel as if they need to shift, particularly in Europe. They need to shift the way they express themselves. They need to code switch. That already is a stressful experience on its own. But for Black deaf youth in particular, it means we're going into white deaf spaces, having to assimilate. We're going to hearing Black spaces, having to assimilate, often feeling like we don't fit in anywhere because of the lack of interpreters of color, international sign particularly, the lack of educators of color who are deaf, the lack of parents and guardians understanding of disability and deafness. battling with that internally and also trying to grow in the community. We see this thread in use of color in Europe, whereby oftentimes they choose not to navigate their identity and experiences because it's much easier to avoid understanding that and assimilate than it is to understand and feel empowered. Yeah, so it's been a really impactful experience so far this year. We launched in February, and this year alone, we've been to 15 different countries to give workshops. At the beginning of every workshop, it's similar. All the white participants are nervous and scared and uncomfortable. All the participants of color are unsure, annoyed, confused. And by the end of the workshop, everybody is more aware, more united, and oftentimes the term we received, the new lens, is used. We worked with a deaf association in Australia to create a 10-week anti-racism workshop talking about Black deaf experiences of First Nation people in Australia, Black people, Asian people, what that looks like in a deaf contest in Australia, and what the community needs to do in terms of advocacy and activism. Oftentimes when we think of advocacy and activism, we think of this grandiose, big platform, of this loud movement, but sometimes advocating for yourself and just being able to speak up for yourself and say what you need, say what you haven't had, find ways to get what you need. That on its own has enough of an impact on the whole community to also want to do that too. When other people see you advocating for yourself, they find the courage to also do the same. I often tell people that 2 years ago, all my anti-racism workshops and work were in hearing spaces because I didn't feel comfortable talking about these things in the deaf community, as I didn't feel that people wanted to hear, well, watch what I had to say. And in the last 2 years, it's been a fast track whirlwind of nonstop conversations, growth, and participation, which has been so beautiful to see. And I'd love to see these spaces integrate deaf and hearing people together, deaf and hearing associations working together to build this cross-cultural understanding of what intersectionality is, what intersectional experiences are, and how to navigate spaces whereby when you're advocating for the rights of youth, not all of them have the same experiences, and not all of them have navigated certain topics in the same way, which is majorly important because advocating for accessibility often means that different parts of the world have different opinions. And if we're always looking at the Western way of doing things, we're leaving out youth of color in these conversations again, and they're already left out in multiple spaces. So how do we collectively come together to ensure that everybody is given a seat at the table when it comes to facilitating change? We have multiple social media platforms. We have a podcast where we talk about deaf topics. We talk about very vulnerable conversations about our upbringing, myself, and everything that I've said so far. Romero with growing up in Sweden, not having an education until he was 13, in Haiti, the way the deaf community sees deaf, the way the Black community sees deaf people in Haiti. Deaf people in Haiti to this day are being killed because their deafness is seen as a bad omen. Trigger warning, but deaf women in particular are being raped, cut apart and dumped in ditches. this means that Rommel himself cannot go back to Haiti, cannot explore his home, cannot understand his upbringing, is not able to meet family who still live in Haiti. That people hide. They do not come out and integrate with society in Haiti because of that perspective. In South Africa, the narrative is very, very different. The deaf community integrate with society, but the wider hearing community does not fully understand what deafness looks like, what deaf culture particularly is. And then here in Europe, for Black deaf youth again, not being able to fit in hearing Black spaces, not being able to fit in white deaf spaces. It's just a layered experience of trauma and of confusion, and not having the mental health facilities to ensure that youth are taken care of means the responsibility is put on us to fight for us. So I hope this opens up conversations where wider collaborations can happen. Further conversations can take place, and more funding is provided for access and important conversations like this. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lydia. I think we will now add me to the spotlight as well. In this background chat with the team, we were discussing that we are learning. Indeed, we are learning quite some new technical skills as well through this ID talk, and it's this mindfulness probably that we are lacking, that of the different needs and the different experiences that are maybe different from what our personal are. And I really liked your expression when you said that advocacy, maybe it sounds something like super big and ambitious, but it's actually speaking on your behalf. And thank you very much for speaking on your behalf and speaking from the heart and bringing a little bit more awareness to our own personal bias, and also this privilege that we have, that we sometimes in a way don't want to see, and we don't want to see the needs of others that are having different privileges or lack of privileges next to us. So thank you very much. Normally at this point, we would break into smaller rooms, and we are only 22 people here in the room, which also includes a big number of our team. As I said before, it's me, facilitator of the talk, Anna, but also there's Maria from SALTO Inclusion Diversity Resource Center, Maria, our social media manager, Olaja, the graphic recorder, and of course, Lydia, our amazing speaker with the two international sign interpreters, Natasha and Marsan. This leaves us to approximately 14-15 participants in the bigger room. And I feel like it will make it more immediate, intimate, the setting to not break out into the rooms, but continue to have this conversation in the bigger room with everybody present. So what I suggest we do is, you can switch maybe also your view to a gallery view to see everybody's screens. And then I would like to invite all of our audience to give a sign, a reaction in this Zoom platform before you take the floor to maybe give a comment, ask a question, share your reactions with our speaker and with our wider audience. I would like to remind that we are still live on Facebook on SALTO Inclusion and Diversity's Facebook page. So please, if you have questions, comments, anything to address, to say this is the moment that we invite all the participants as well to address their questions and to take their stage. Please. Maria?
Yes, I got several questions. I don't know, or should I just start with one?
Let's start with two, if you have several.
Okay. Thank you, Lydia, for the inspiring talk. I had the chance to hear you already once, and it's always really insightful, and I'm learning a lot. I just wanted to ask you, how important is having role models, according to you? What that means for young people? And maybe the second one would be, well, because you are newly elected president of EUDEF Youth Association, what are your plans now, or the first things you want to work on? Maybe things that were not tackled before, but that you identified as really important to work on. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. The first question about role models, I think that we can't be what we don't see. So growing up, my grandma, I heard so many stories of her experiences growing up in a part of South Africa. And then on top of that, my mom, who had moved to Ireland, being an activist, working with migrant women who had experienced domestic violence, run away from home, and so on. I think I had this, I may not have had black deaf role models, but I had women who were fighting for justice, who were fighting for access, who were fighting for hope in front of me. And being able to see that growing up meant that from a very young age, I knew for myself, whatever I do in this world, I want to fight for something that benefits the communities that I'm in and ensures that everybody has a seat at the table. If we don't see that, oftentimes we think we can't be that. So that's a major reason why I think role models are important. I'm grateful for all the powerful women that I'm surrounded by. I'm grateful for all the men who support us. I'm grateful for everybody in the world who either takes a stand or pushes those who want to. I think that's really important. And then your second question, EUDI, yes. Growing up, the deaf community has like international events, camps, seminars, and so on. And growing up in the deaf community means I often attended them, but I was never like, people didn't speak to me, they didn't communicate with me, they didn't sign with me. If I was somewhere, for instance, when I went to Czech Republic at the age of 14, every international youth that participated asked my best friend questions about me, even though we were right beside each other. They could have communicated with me. And that is the experience of many Black deaf youth all over Europe. So I want to ensure that we're giving space to hard of hearing youth to participate. We're giving space to deaf youth to participate. We're giving space to youth in the LGBT community. We're giving space to youth of color. We're giving space to plethora of identities to feel safe within the community and feel seen and find their voice within the community. That's just a major part of the reason why I put myself forward for president, because in my thought process and discussing with other people that I work with, it was like after the study session, we went from an all-white board to 12, 13 people of color working within the organization and me being president. If I'm able to influence that kind of change through the focus group, what can I do as president when youth see themselves in that position? What can I do on a higher level, working together with people and ensuring that they have access to rooms that I didn't have access to growing up? So yeah, that's just a big thing for me, just opening doors and ensuring that every single deaf youth, regardless of their identity, feels seen and feels involved and feels, I don't want the next generation to sit down and be like, oh, I grew up and I wasn't included. That ends here. That's my vision for the next 2 years. Thank you.
I see from Maria's face that she has more questions and kind of follow up, because at some point she was like, I want to know more. So Maria, since we don't have a very big lineup of questions yet, you can take the time and ask another question of your choice.
Sorry, I got one more, at least at the moment is only one, but I see that Lydia has her hands up. So maybe you go and I will keep mine for later.
Please, Lydia.
Can you hear me? Because yes, okay.
Yes, very well.
Not working. So, okay. Thank you, Lydia, for your inspirational talk. And I was wondering if you look at the Erasmus Plus program and intersectionality, I wonder if you have any thoughts about this, because I always find it kind of difficult. And when we talk about inclusion, we often talk about including this specific target group you're missing. But when it comes to intersectionality, it's so much bigger. Do you have any thoughts about it? It's not a really good specific question, but I was wondering about this.
I'm not quite clear on the question that you're asking me.
No, I was afraid of that.
Maybe I can help you rephrase it somehow, because I think, we are doing this series of ID talks because we're also interested to see how these topics that we talk about are reflected on the international level of youth work. So Erasmus Plus being this program that is opening opportunities for young people through non-formal education internationally. How do you think can it be relevant to also include young people that are facing multiple discrimination factors? So, because it's already quite challenging to engage people that are less privileged, but when these factors of discrimination are multiple, maybe it is making this access even more challenging. Do I understand it right, Irja?
Yes, I'm sorry. I assumed just everyone would know the Erasmus Plus programs. But yes, you rephrased it very well, Anna. Thank you.
That's really clear. I think 3 major things have been really impactful in terms of making changes. One has been social media. Many youth are on these platforms, and oftentimes if they're scrolling through your page, they don't see themselves represented, they don't see diversity represented, they don't see a conversation that they want to participate in represented, the interest has gone. Social media is a huge way of connecting with the youth today and like inviting them to participate. The second is collaborations. I really feel as if that has been a huge shift for this year. We had with EDY the 2022 work plan where we've gone to 5 different countries and spoken to the youth of color, and we've spoken to the deaf youth associations, created policies with them and so on. And the reason why many youth of color decided to participate is because they saw our faces and knew we were leading those workshops. So that brings me to my third point: the people on your staff and the people on your board, do they represent the people that you want to be involved in the projects and the work that you do? If they don't, that becomes challenging. And if they do, you welcome more into the space that you work in. For instance, during the study session, we had a facilitator working with us who, the study session was on xenophobia, migration, and anti-racism in youth spaces. And we had specifically asked for a facilitator of color who knew sign language, but they gave us a white facilitator who knew Spanish sign language, meaning we spent a lot of time explaining terms to her in terms of anti-racism and a lot of time correcting her sign language in terms of international sign language, which she didn't know. And then during the time of the actual study session, we did the human library where 4 youth of color talked about their life experiences, really shared their trauma. And it was very heavy. And we did a roundtable where we spoke to them about how they felt after. This facilitator, being a white woman, stood up in an all person of color deaf face and spoke. And she goes, wow, I feel like if you had introduced a 5th person who was white, you all would have learned so much more. And that really created a space where everybody was emotional. Youth almost started crying, and she was unapologetic about what she had just done. And the next day I was called up to the main offices and asked why I had asked her to leave. and several other participants who were intruding to leave. And when I explained myself, they apologized for what had happened, but they asked me from my network to ensure the COE had more diversity in their department, which was shocking for me because you're the Council of Europe, you should have diversity in your network. Why are you asking me for Black people? We're not going to participate if we do not have a safe space to do so. So collaboration, social media, and inclusive participation. Okay.
I see a reaction, or I'm not sure if this is from Lubna, a reaction just to celebrate what Lydia just said, or it's asking for a space to speak. Yeah, Lubna, if possible, also maybe you can write in a chat if there is something that you would like to ask. But I think what you did, Lydia, really requires a lot of courage to speak up in front of institutions, which young people are very often reluctant to do. And is not, it's also this discrimination based on your age. When you're a young person, you're in this big institution, very often you feel very shy to point out to their wrongdoings, when actually you should bring the change and should be okay to make other actors uncomfortable, because unless we are feeling uncomfortable, we are not changing anything in our behaviors and in our practices. So yeah, thank you very much. Okay, I see that Lubna just clapped for you, Lydia. I think, yeah, well done, she says. Any other questions or comments?
Lubna was one of the participants in our study session in Budapest. She's now the inclusion officer at EUDI, which is amazing. So thanks, Lubna.
Oh, great. Great to see you here, Lubna, too. Any other questions or comments, or anything else you would like to ask, Lydia? Dear audience, please take the floor and use this opportunity. If not, I'm sure me, Maria, and the rest of the team, we have like a million questions that we would like to ask ourselves. Since no new questions are coming yet, I would like to use this opportunity of facilitator and ask one of my questions. I'm wondering what we can do with young people that are not the ones discriminated, but the ones that are discriminating. How can we educate them? How can we open their eyes to see the diversity and to be more respectful and to develop some more understanding and bring them to a dialogue with their peers? Do you have any, I understand I asked for a recipe, but do you have any ideas, suggestions, what we can do with the wider public and especially with young people to be more open, to be more forward thinking in a way? I don't know even how to put this in the right words. What we can do with them to make your struggle a little bit easier.
I think my opinion on this is usually controversial. As I often say, I think both parties need to come together with a more open heart in terms of youth of color often have this trauma, and then where conversations can be very triggering. But when we talk about white youth and our open heart into having these conversations, we also need to realize that people can't know what they don't know. So when we do come to these tables and we do have these conversations, we need to come to them with, I'm not mad at you, I'm mad at this problem. I'm disappointed at how this problem has affected our community. How can we work together to ensure change happens? And when I talk about my work with the UDI, I often say that if it wasn't for two staff that work there, we wouldn't be where we are today, because as allies, they gave me the platform to do what I do. It could have easily been an email that I sent where I said I wanted to set up a focus group, and they're like, oh, we don't really have time for that right now. Or I could have easily been like, oh, what's the point? They're not going to give me the platform to do what I need to do. it's just about taking that first step from a place of curiosity rather than a place of trauma, and giving people the space to grow. If we have that conversation and people still have that mindset of undermining lived experiences and facts, then that's where the conversation ends. But just have that conversation, try to have an open heart in addressing the situations that we need to talk about in this world, and that's where change happens.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I will take this as a quote for me from today, that you cannot know what you don't know, and education and information is a key to understanding and to building certain level of also mutual trust, to open up and to talk about deeper issues and to talk about trauma and start the joint process of healing together, because I think it's a society as a whole that needs healing. Yeah, thank you very much. To answer my question, I'm very happy that I had the chance to ask my question. Anybody else would like to ask a question? We still have maybe 5-7 more minutes of Lydia's time for us. You can show a sign using reaction, and I will pass you the floor. Maria, okay. Today you have, it's your day today, you know. All the questions that you have accumulated in you for many, many weeks, now you have the time to ask all of them.
Yeah, it's, I even don't know how to formulate this, but it was about something that you said earlier, Lydia, how important it is to feel uncomfortable, and that's the sign that, you know, we are changing something, or that we are in process of change. But, you know, most people don't want to feel that way. It's scary. Yeah, we want to have a pleasant conversation, and, you know, that we stay in our comfort zone. But what is necessary, according to you, to step out of that comfort zone and to address the differences in a respectful way, and to have the open, honest, genuine conversations, and to create and build partnerships on that? Thank you.
I think it's a matter of just feeling the fear and doing it anyway. These conversations are never going to be easy. They're never going to go as we predict. We're bound to say the wrong things. Not everybody will be comfortable at the same capacity, but nothing changes if we don't do anything. So just feel the fear and step into that uncomfortable space. And what I've often found is you're uncomfortable until the conversation begins. So it's either you stay away from that space and that conversation and you wonder, or you step into that conversation and you grow.
Yeah, but people are really afraid, like, not to offend, not to, as you said, say something wrong. Is it better then to ask others different from us, like how they would like to be addressed, or, you know, like how to, because, yeah, I think our people then stay away from the conversation or remain silent, or because they're so afraid of not to do something wrong.
I think sometimes we try to have conversations before knowing people. When you connect with somebody outside of the uncomfortable conversations and get to know who somebody is, whether that's a 5-minute conversation about the work that they do, what they're passionate about, who they are, what you have in common, that opens the door to deeper conversations. Where things go wrong is not knowing somebody and not presenting who you are in a way that they understand your intention. That's when everything goes wrong. If somebody knows you and knows your heart and they can understand your intention, then these conversations go a lot smoother.
Yeah, we have time for maybe 1 or 2 final questions. And this is also a little signal to Olaja to say that your moment is very near, so please get ready. If there are no more questions, I have maybe one final one. You are now in a position of quite strong influence. You are president in an association that has a big membership, and this is somehow already a milestone, an achievement in a career for a young activist. And I adore your quote about you not choosing to be an activist, but you having to be one. So thank you very much for that. But what do you see as a next possible step for you in your career, and where would you like to go next? So what should we follow? What channels should we follow? Where should we follow the next step of your sphere of influence? Please share with us a little bit about your future plans.
At the moment, we're trying to do more of what we're already doing. We're trying to collaborate more with more people. In terms of what we do at the UDY, you can find us on all social media platforms. We're based in Belgium. So if there's any organizations or associations that are also based in Belgium and want to collaborate, shoot us an email. In terms of Save by the Sign, we're based in Ireland. We do a lot of creative work online, so that also would be great to collaborate on and just get a message out to a wider audience. You can find us Save by the Sign on all platforms. You can find me, Lydia, Gratis, on all platforms. I just want people to, I shouldn't feel uncomfortable, but I often feel uncomfortable when I'm put on a pedestal because of the work that I do, because for me, it's a thing of, can we all just eat together? Can we break bread together and just enjoy each other's work together? It's not so much, look what I'm doing, it's look what we're doing. It takes so much courage to put yourself in a space of uncertainty and unfamiliarity and still hope that change is sparked. So I want to see more of that. I want to see deaf youth step out of the comfort zone and into the hearing world. I want to see hearing community not worry so much about how do I speak for that person? How do I communicate with that person? How will a Black person feel if I forget the ifs and just step out of your comfort zone? That's where all the magic happens. And we all just grow and learn, collaborate, and it's easier said than done, of course, but if we can start, why not?
I believe Anna has some technical issues. So maybe Olaja, if you're ready to present what you have done today while Anna is joining us. Yeah.
Okay, I am back again. I think
Good.
internet today wants to play all the possible tricks on me, but I am not giving up. I think just like you, Lydia, inspiration to not to give in to technology or any other external hazard. So I was there until the moment when you were sharing a bit of your plans, and thank you very much for that. In the meantime, I managed to follow you on Instagram, and I also recommend everybody else, because this is one of the most inspiring, just visually, Instagram pages I've followed recently. So you will get a lot of likes tonight when you check your social media channels. I think this is also a super cool moment when we can get more creativity into our feed. And that would be Olaja. Maybe you forgot about her by now, but she never forgets about us, because she has this amazing brain capacity to listen, process, and depict the conversation in a graphic form. So Olaja, you have the floor. Once you're done, then we come back to Lydia for the final remarks. Please share your screen, show us your work today.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me correctly, because internet today is very changing because of the weather conditions as well. So it has been a pleasure to be part of this talk. A lot of personal remarks, a lot of learnings from the experience that Lydia was living herself, and that empowered her, or at least that's what I got, to really make a difference through the different organizations that she's kind of pushing through, and to really work a lot with role models to tell other youngsters that are part of this community, to tell them that they can make a difference themselves, and that they are not alone, and that they can be with others and make better world for themselves, but also for the rest of the world that is around them, and that not always makes the game easy. So of course this will be enriched, let's say, during the next few days, and you will receive the final version as well in your email. So thank you, Lydia, and everyone part of the talk. It was very interesting for me.
Also, a little life hack that we have learned from our previous speakers, that they always crop this part of the graphic recording and use it as their personal photo for their social media. So Lydia, I'm really impressed by this really nice depiction of you on this poster. And to our audience, you will receive a follow-up email with the YouTube video, with a podcast, graphic recording, as well as an article that we asked Lydia to deliver after this ID talk in your mailboxes within coming 2 weeks. Now, if you stop sharing your screen, Olaja, I will give the floor back to Lydia for some final closing remarks. And to our audience, yes, please, Lydia, you have the floor.
First of all, thank you for having me for the ID talks. It's been great. I really enjoyed meeting most of you. I mean, I was about to say last year, but it was like a few months ago. It feels like so much has happened this year, so I can't keep up. But I really hope that this isn't the last time we work together. I'd love to just do more together in terms of the youth space, in terms of change making conversations online, in person, and influencing cross communities. But yeah, thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Lydia. It was pleasure and privilege to be hosting you today on the ID Talks. You have received also multiple words of gratitude in our chat, so please have a look at it when you find the time. To our audience, I would like to let you know that we have one more ID talk lined up for this season to conclude the anti-racism series. In 2 weeks' time, on Wednesday, 2 p.m. Central European Time, November 2nd, don't forget, please join. We will be happy to have you returning back. And yeah, let's go out there and try to make our world a little bit better place to be and to live and to thrive. Bye-bye.